He just works everybody else under the table. And then we have two
Welcome
18-year-olds.
everyone. Welcome to the Special Finance Committee joint meeting with the Agricultural Advisory Select Committee and the Environmental Advisory Select Committee of July 9th, 2024. Councillor Shukin, would you do a territorial acknowledgement?
Sure. Very simply, I'd just like to recognize that we are on the territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly our near neighbors, the Shannon First Nation and the Sauk First Nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have an agenda before us. Committee, are there any additions? We have some paints, so we'll add the paints as 5C under correspondence. There are agendas and paints on the center of the table for the two committees and chairs, so you can sit closer if you like. Come on in, Mr. Parry.
Good morning.
Seat for you.
So move adoption as amended.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a presentation by our conservation officer. However, there is a delay on Malahat, so we will welcome him when he arrives and keep moving forward on the agenda. What I would like to do first is to have the two advisory committees just do a roll call for our recording secretary. You can just state your first name, please. That would be great. And I guess which committee? Yes.
Start with
Start with me. Bill Cave.
Bill Cave from Meows.
Andrew Penn, Agriculture.
Andrew Penn of Ag Committee.
Robin Tunnicliffe, Ag Committee.
Matt Ashton, Ag Committee.
Rick Perron, Miask.
Hannah Hall, yes.
Sasha Kubicek, Agriculture.
Brent Olson, Ag Committee.
Andy McKinnon, Miask.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will ask for public participation at this point in the agenda. If anybody from the community would like to speak at the mic, please step forward with your name and the street in which you live. Now is the time. Okay, we'll keep moving along. Okay, so we have some, we'll just delay, I think, the presentation. There will be an opportunity for questions from the committee and the advisory committees as well. So if we move on to reports, page 3, Cougar Predation in Metchosin, council meeting resolution dated April 22nd, 2024, and then committee discussion next steps. Doing the motion to just, Lucy?
No, we don't need a motion, but you want to explain what Mr. Powell is.
Oh, Mr. Powell's. I'm not sure why Mr. Powell's is not here.
I'll explain. Mr. Powell sent his regrets because he is a sick mother, so he's not able to attend. And Alex Fletcher is here from the Ag Committee. Alex, there are some agendas on the table and seats closer to the meeting table. You're welcome to sit. Councilor Gray.
Yeah, I'll just offer regrets from Gary Fletcher, the chair of Miask. He wasn't able to make it to one of conflict meetings, and Marilee Cohen is not here, and I think Aaron Vanderwater is not here either. So regrets from them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Candice Lacombe sends her regrets as well.
Candice Lacombe, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay. So my question is, do we need a motion to receive the reports, or this is just for? Yes. Yes. Okay. So can I have a motion to receive the reports on page 3. Motion by Councillor Peck and seconded by Mayor Lily. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Correspondence, page 5. Correspondence related to the Cougar predation. We had previous correspondence in April. April 5th, 9th, 22nd, and 8th and 14th. So throughout the month, from Robin Tunnicliffe, Chair of the Agriculture Advisory Select Committee, Shannon Hamilton, Nicole Shukin, and Jeff Bacon. We also have page 17, the PowerPoint presentations to Council from Mollie Cameron of WildWise on April 22nd, Coexisting with Cougars, and Matt Ashton, Parry Bay Sheep Farm, June 17th, 2024, Wild Predators and Sustainable Livestock Farming. And then we have the pages that we see here this evening from other community members as well. They've come in the last 2 days. Welcome, come on in. Mr. Norris has arrived. So can I have a motion just to receive these pieces of correspondence? Moved by Councillor Shukin, second by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so back to number 2 on the agenda. Actually it is Sergeant Scott Norris has arrived from the BC Conservation Officer Services. Would you like to step up to the podium and engage in conversation with us, please?
Hello, apologies, there's an accident on the Malahat there, so it was a dead stop for 20 minutes. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, no worries. You start with questions, or would you like me to talk a little bit about our policy and guidelines?
I think starting with your policy and guidelines would be great.
Okay.
Yes, the educational component would be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, so Conservation Officer Service for all sort of dangerous wildlife, bears, cougars, wolves, coyotes, we have guidelines for our response. It's a matrix that's generated in terms of how we respond to events involving these large carnivores and predators. So that's number 1, what we follow when we are receiving calls for service. Whether it's just a cougar sighting, for example, or it's a cougar that is acting threatening or aggressive towards people, or it's a cougar that has killed livestock. And so they're broken down in the guidelines down to category 1, 2, and 3. I'm sure some of you have probably seen this. It's on the Conservation Officer's website, and it's widely available and talked about in many circles. So when we have an incident where a cougar predates on livestock, we look then to the next piece of policy document we have, which is called preventing and responding to conflicts with large carnivores. This document talks primarily about bears, but it goes on to talk about wolves, coyotes, and cougars as well. And so some of the things in here talk about husbandry as a prime example of what conservation officers would look at when responding to one of these calls. So most of you are aware of husbandry in terms of sheep or livestock. It's how someone cares for their animals, how someone protects their animals, what mitigation strategies they might have to protect those animals from predators. And so these are sort of our guiding principles, those 2 documents. Now, when we're looking at the response, we use a best management practice for sheep document that is put together through Ministry of Agriculture. And so this document that many of you I'm sure are aware about, again widely available on ministry websites, talks about some of the steps and mitigation strategies that farmers should be and producers should be using to protect their sheep or livestock, whatever that may be, whether it's cattle or whether it's birds. So there's different documents similar to this. This one is for sheep that we're talking about. And so we look at this document, and then when we are talking to producers, when they've made that call saying that cougar is predated on their sheep, we're asking these questions, and a lot of them are based on our policy and based on the best management practices. And so, we receive numerous calls throughout BC and in my area, which is the South Island, people having sheep predated upon. It's not something that happens daily or weekly. It seems very cyclical for the most part, as most of you are aware, particularly the producers are aware. Lambing season is a big season where we get an increase in calls for service for trying to mitigate those losses. Now, there's also a program that came in place a number of years ago, approximately 2019, I want to say, pre-COVID, for compensation for producers. And so to sort of mitigate and compensate some of the losses, there is some money available through the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Cattlemen's Association oversees that project. Now, there are, again, best management practices that are expected to be followed in order to receive compensation. And so, again, that program is designed and was designed, as far as I understand, to incentivize producers to take mitigative steps to protect their livestock. The government is trying to find a balance between protecting wildlife and protecting the interest of producers. And where is that balance? Sometimes it's weighted towards a predator, sometimes it's weighted towards producers. And so we as conservation officers, again, look towards our policy and our experience and try to make the best decision based on the circumstances involved. And so there is no easy answer, there is no easy fix. However, again, following the best management practices is the best way to ensure there are minimal losses and predators can still coexist on the landscape. And obviously we're all aware there's a healthy deer population, there's healthy raccoon populations on Vancouver. Those are two of the main, not to mention all the feral rabbits. Those are some of the main things that cougars are predating upon. We want them to continue doing that. And as long as the sheep or whatever the livestock is are being protected properly, there's generally not a lot of conflict with cougars and the rest of us. So that's a little bit of a snippet. I'm not sure if there's anything further you want me to delve into deeper. I can go deeper, but I thought I would start with that.
That's great, thank you. So let's open it up for some questions from the two committees, well, we've got three committees here, the two advisory committees and council committee. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Norris? Councillor Epp.
I just wondered if you could give us a little outline of the best management practices that you're talking about.
Yeah, so one of the first things obviously we talk to producers about is locking their animals up at night in a secure facility, whether it's a barn or an electrified area with most likely needing a roof or something, a wall fence, not just a couple of wires. Cougars can jump 20 feet in the air, so it has to be something structurally sound that a cougar can't get through. So number one would be, again, locking animals up at night is the most important one that we see. So much of the cougar predation is between dusk and dawn. Cougars are most active at dusk and dawn, and those points in between. Periodically, they are out in the daytime. Those are more the concerning cougar issues that we see once in a while. And then next would be electric fencing. If you can't have a barn or a structure to lock your sheep up at night, having some sort of electric fencing that you can protect from behind. Now the next one after that is having guard animals. So what the best management practices suggest are donkeys, llamas, and various different dog breeds. There's a number of different dog breeds, and it goes into that in a little more detail. And I know that can be problematic. There have been complaints from farmers and other non-farming community members all over BC, not just Metchosin, who are concerned about dogs barking and making noise, and people are concerned about these dogs getting loose and potentially having another impact in the community. But so those are some of the key things that we look for, and if you can't have those as a farmer, having protection in terms of humans presence on that landscape while those sheep are on the landscape. And so keeping areas free from your fencing, treed areas, I mean, it's fantastic that Metchosin has so much forest cover, but again, when you've got fields between forest cover and fields and forest cover, that makes great habitat for cougars as well, for that predating upon whatever is in those areas. So those are some of the key ones.
Councillor Shukin?
But Scott, do you mind if I call you?
Go ahead, please. Yeah, thank you.
A few things you said during your opening comments quite resonated with me. Big one is there's no easy answer to all this. Then the other one was, what is the balance between addressing producer interests and then wildlife protection as well? But just wanted to touch on the best practices you mentioned in fencing, for example. So fencing is one of these things that can help, but only sort of, and you alluded to that by saying that the Cougars can jump 20 feet sometimes. But what is your experience with fencing, and has it worked somewhat? Has it worked, or are there occasions where it doesn't work at all, or times when it's very effective?
It's very effective. It just needs to be high enough in an area where a cougar can't get through. Now, if you've got some fencing with some cover on it, which you can see at a lot of construction sites, where they'll have the tarping material between some fencing, cougar can't see into it. It's less likely to jump over top of that. And then if you've got strands of electric fence, just a couple of strands on the very top of that, most likely they're going to try to get over it. That's going to zap them. But if they can't see in, that's sort of the most effective way. They're less likely to jump over a 20-foot fence if they have no idea what they're going to land on the other side. Or having some sort of a roof structure is another way to do it. And there's on the market, and in terms of just people being ingenious, there's different ways and means to erect a fence with some sort of temporary roof structure. And they don't have to be big fancy barns, but something that a cougar can't see through and get through easily is the most likely option that's going to prevent the predation, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Marilyn?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation and for being here tonight. I
Thank
really
you. Thanks for
appreciate
having
it. One of the things that I've heard a lot about is and lots of questions about large carnivores, in particular cougars, becoming habituated to attacking wild or livestock. Can you comment on the habituation in your experience? Is this a real phenomena, or does it look like that? Or please comment on that. That's my first question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really good question. We often look at habituation or food conditioning with bears. Cougars, I don't see it the same way. Cougars are predators. They like to eat meat, and they like to eat live meat. That means anything's on the menu that's in their size and what they're looking for in that bracket. So it could be elk, it could be deer, it could be sheep, and lambs are easy. And so what we've seen many times over the years is mother cougars teaching their kittens to kill. And when you've got lambs and lots of them on the landscape, it's a very easy prey item for mom to teach the kittens to kill. And so we've seen that where they've gone in, they've just drank the blood from 5 to 7 lambs and moved on, and only eaten one of those lambs and moved on. Now, having said that, if you look at the pattern of what we see happening is we'll get a rash of calls in the spring when the lamb are born, and then all of a sudden the cougars revert completely right back to natural food and prey. So they're going back for deer, raccoons, rabbits. And so there isn't that same level of food conditioning that you see in bears, where once a bear gets into garbage and realizes, this is what I'm doing, I eat garbage and I go around neighborhoods and I eat garbage, those bears are always coming back to human settlements for garbage or human food sources. They know it's an easy, high caloric option for them. We don't see that as much in cougars. There are some that over the many years I've been doing this, you get the odd cougar that starts predating on sheep and does do it for a period of time, but usually there's something goes on in terms of the population, whether the lambs grow up, the farmer moves the sheep somewhere else, and the cougar's back to predating on deer. So it's not the same. I mean, it potentially could happen if you had absolutely no deer and no raccoons and no other prey items in the area. Would a cougar potentially just continue predating on sheep? Most likely, because that's the food source that's available, right? So again, having mitigation strategies in place so the cougars are going to go for their natural preys and not just the easy lambs running around a field unprotected. That goes a long way to preventing them being food conditioned to sticking to lambs or chickens or whatever it is. But again, animals are opportunistic. When there's an easy meal, they're going to take it. You know, the less energy they can expend, the better. We can watch our grocery store, jump in our car, it's not easy, or not hard for us to do that. They have to rely on whatever energy they put out, they need to be able to get that back and then some to store it up for the next hunt. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And my second question is, through the chair, is the conservation office under-resourced? Because that's one thing that we can do as a district and as a council is to advocate that we need more conservation officers on the South Island. So if you can't answer that question, that's fine, but I thought I would ask it.
You know, it's a great question again. You know, it's one of those ones, I'm just a guy who works for the BC government and I do the best I can at what I have. Is my opinion there could be more of us? I guess it is just like most workers in most industries, which there was a partner or someone else to lighten the load for them. You know, we are short a body right now in the South Island. Peter had retired, Peter Powell's retired. We got a position back with him, but then we had another guy move on to another job. So we're waiting for a replacement for him. So there should be 5 of us in the South Island. Right now there's 4 of us. And for a while there was only 3 of us. And that just unfortunately is, you know, policing and nursing and hospitals and doctors. There's a lot of that in a lot of industries where it's not always easy to get people right back into those positions and fill them quickly. But again, so we are short, but hopefully that won't be for much longer. There are ways, so, within the Conservation Officer Service, in different parts of the province, we have agreements where municipalities have jointly funded positions for more conservation officers. So that's an option that Metchosin could look at, maybe jointly with Langford to other municipalities in Greater Victoria that, and again, we've got successful models in many different places in the province for that, to bolster the officer presence in those communities.
Thank you.
And is there anyone from the from MIAS that would like to speak? Any questions that you have for Mr. Norris? Ag Committee? Sasha?
Just to expand on Mary Teresa's question, can you comment on the other resources that the Conservation Office has at their disposal for helping with different category of conflict situations? I believe you hire contractors that may come in and help with either dogs or trapping. Can you give us an idea of what kind of resources your department has that the producers can rely on, specifically on the South Island?
Well, yeah, so it's a good question. Over the years, we've hired houndsman contractors. So these are people who are licensed hunters who have hounds, and we've utilized them quite successfully over a number of years. Now they're people who often have other jobs and have other things going on in their lives, so they're not government workers and we can't rely on them always at the drop of a hat. Now, certain times of year and certain times that has been successful and it's worked very well for us, but it isn't something we always have at our disposal all the time. The SEAL Service does have some hound programs in the interior. There's none on the island right now. It's quite an intensive portfolio to manage in terms of officers having hounds, which is why the contractors work quite well for us. And that's essentially what we do. But they're not able to go out on their own and just free rein go after cats and be hired to do that.
Yeah, they would go through
us, and they would have to be with us.
Yeah, but so there's nothing on the island at this time.
We don't have any of our own hound program, no, we just use the contractors.
And are there active contractors that if, for instance, tonight there was a situation that warranted it, you guys could reach out to?
We could, yes.
Okay.
We do have, yes. One in the Metchosin area, yeah.
Okay.
Brent Donaldson, Agriculture Committee. I'm a sheep farm, small flock. I attended two Pete Powell's presentations, and he alluded to the fact that there was a fairly good success rate with tranquilizing and relocating. And I was led to believe, and maybe you can enlighten me, that that program, is it still functioning, or is that a practice that you folks do?
There isn't really a program. If you look at our procedure manual for preventing and responding to conflicts with large carnivores, it actually does state that we rarely will relocate cougars. Cougars don't relocate very well in terms of the science. However, since I've been in this office working in the Duncan area, which is 14 years now in the South Island, both Peter and I together have relocated successfully a number of cougars. Now, those are cougars that are not conflict cougars. Those are generally been the ones that have been in downtown Victoria that we've been able to successfully tranquilize and move on. Cougars that are predating on livestock that we come across that are in their home range, we often are not moving and relocating. And a lot of what we've seen over the years is it's the younger cougars, male cougars looking for territory. They're the ones that end up in, say, downtown Victoria, Langford, somewhere where they don't belong, and they're looking for a way out. So they're still afraid of people. They don't want to be in the location they're at. And so we give them that helping hand and move them out of town. And we do that in conjunction with the wildlife branch. So we have to get support from the wildlife branch biologist and provincial veterinarian, which is what we always seek to do. But again, it's not a general standard practice that we relocate cougars in the CO service, particularly when they're in conflict.
Right. So second question. So we've been farming sheep for over 30 years, and certainly it's been relatively quiet with cougar activity, and we did have a conflict, and we lost 3 ewes in 2 different farms, actually, a couple of years back. And now the bears are gone, the cougars are here, and there was a dispatching of a number of cougars last year in Metchosin. If they weren't dispatched, what would the landscape look like when they're euthanizing 6 to 8 cats? It strikes me that there will be a lot more sheep being eaten or killed. So that would be my concern. Like I understand people, want the balance, but when you get that large number coming into an area like Metchosin, if there isn't some sort of drastic action taking place, are they going to be living in Royal Bay in the schoolyard? Or do you have any stats about, the increase? Because certainly, for the time I've been here, there has been a spike of cougar activity. Is there any sort of stats on that?
I think, the biologists maybe keep a little track of it, but I don't think they kind of track more to do with hunter statistics in terms of, because it's compulsory reporting. So anytime a hunter kills a cougar, they have to send in the documentation of where it was killed, when it was killed. So that's one way they're tracking the number of cougars and the cougar population. So it's a cyclical thing. Their population goes up and goes down. And so at certain times, you've got good prey populations and the predator's population goes up, and then the prey population comes down, the predator population comes down. If you've got an artificial population of prey in the landscape, such as sheep or other livestock, that can then over time artificially increase the local population. And that's why it's so important that farmers are taking mitigated strategies to protect their sheep at all times, so we keep a balance in the predator-prey cycle as opposed to increasing the predators at the expense of the farming community, right? And so, and that's again, when we're looking at, in terms of the calls we're getting and what the conflict is in an area, and yet, last year was a bit of an anomaly, those 6 cougars that we had to take out in the spring of 2023, but that was 2 different family groups of mom teaching young ones to kill. And so it was one of those scenarios where we looked at the overall impact of the community. You've got all of a sudden a large predator number in the landscape, and we knew the impact is going to continue. And then obviously that then potentially increases public safety risk in the landscape. And we start getting more and more cougar sightings in the daytime, more and more cougar sightings coming around people's houses, checking stuff out because they're starting to realize, hey, all the good food is near those farms over there. And again, that's one of those ones where, again, as conservation officers, we're not the wildlife managers. That's what the biologists are paid to do. However, we try to look at the public safety risk, and we try to look at what is the property damage going on in an area, and then we make those decisions. But that's also not made solely for that reason. We have a lot of other duties and a lot of ground to cover in southern Vancouver Island. And so we're not always on 24 hours a day. And again, when you've got 4 officers covering everything south of Ladysmith, we can be in Port Renfrew, we can be anywhere any given day. And again, trying to cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, really isn't easy for us to be able to be there and go after every single cougar that has killed livestock. And again, this is where the mitigation strategies are ultra important because of that as well. And again, the deer population is high. We get so many more complaints, to be honest, about injured deer getting hit by cars, or sick deer, or too many deer eating my roses, because the deer population is so high in Greater Victoria and out to Shukin, Metchosin. And so the cougars are, the main predator for those animals. So we don't want to take out and have predator-free zones because we know what happens with the prey.
Could John ask a question through me?
So,
Yeah.
okay, I'd like to go back to this best management practices. I was heavily involved in the development of that program. I was up in Caribou there at a meeting when we set this up, and I fought that language tooth and nail because I thought it would come back and bite us here. But it was this specific language that was used in other programs. And so it passed. But the requirements of it, they're not requirements. It's suggested, it's not prescriptive. So those are the suggested ways of helping prevent predator kills. I don't know whether you've got to talk back from the LPP Oversight Committee. Did you hear anything back from that? No?
Not recently, no. I know I've spoken with Cam Hill maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're working on it now. But our difference here is that we are in an area which had for many, many decades no predators. So we have a system that's built on the fact that there's no predators. And now the predators are returning, which is not against my will, but it makes us have a unique situation where we can't really fight back against them very easily. And as they expand into Central Saanich, we're going to see Cobble Hill, Salt Spring Island, we're going to see a reduction in sheep farming. Because sheep farming is really a marginal thing, and it's only very successful in areas where there are no predators. So what we are faced with is a situation where we can't mitigate our risks and keep farming. We can only face up to the fact that maybe the time has come that society doesn't want this anymore, that my style of farming has become obsolete. I hope not, but if we're going to, I think that cougars and bears, we haven't had any trouble with bears for two years now. I think it's specific animals that cause the problem, and if we allow them in, I'm happy with that. But when one is causing trouble for farming, for sheep farming to exist amongst predators, the ones that are causing the trouble have to go. And that's the basis of it. These are prescriptive, these are not prescriptive policies, they're suggestive. And I can't electric fence all, whatever it is, 10 10 miles of pasture peripheries that I have. And wait a minute, well, we have Matt
We did that.
babysitting the Cougars, had them in at night, and the Cougars were made in the daytime.
So we were doing the right stuff.
But anyway, I know we're in a difficult situation. The social pressures are changing, and the social will is changing, and maybe I'm going to have to change. But it's a difficult situation. It's not as simple as putting up fences. I could put out zone guns on every field and have them go off every 5 minutes. But that would be safe for everybody, but it would scare the Cougars away, scare the bears away.
Dogs out of the park.
The dogs would get out of the fences. There's all sorts of issues with dogs. Anyway, I'm stealing the show. It's Scott's presentation.
If I
Mr.
may,
Brown? Yes?
Rick Perron, Miask. I can't imagine your place being fenced with 10-foot high fences,
20.
being electric, 20, whatever, because then it would be like William Head all over again. And, you know, that really puts a domestic appeal onto our community, which I don't like. That's all I have to say about the fences. Barns might be a different thing, which...
But they don't kill using the barn. They kill in the daytime. You let them all, they got a grate, and you come out after you're finished eating, you find 2 dead beside it. And that's happened to us.
So another thing, Mr. Norris, that I've noticed and have listened to people in our community is the West Shore is developing at a very great speed. And in 2017, Metchosin and Langford and First Nations had this big land swap, and quite a lot of the acreage has been clear cut. So the habitat for the wildlife has changed. Across the highway from there is the Souk Wilderness Park, and hundreds of people visit that expansive forested land. And again, it's humans that are putting the pressure, I think, this is one of the things, the pressure on the wildlife. And so they're moving further out. They're coming here to eat. They're exploring the city limits as well. I mean, as far as UVic and Oak Bay, Central Sandwich, of course. And maybe this will be cyclical, I don't know. We have a very healthy population of cougars and bears on the island, and some other wildlife as well, but it's the whole island's quite a haven for wildlife. I know there's a lot of pushback from our public about dispatching animals. We're not asking for a call, I don't think, the farmers, but certainly to address the ones that are teaching and repetitively doing that. And maybe it cycles, maybe it stops. You know, my husband has said here, we had bear kills a couple years ago. Never in 35 years have we had that. And now that seems to have stopped, and now it's the cougars. So I'm not sure if this is the behavior that's happening, but certainly humans have caused quite a bit of this, for sure. It's not just the attractants that are out there. In this community, people are pretty good about their attractants. In other communities, not quite as much. So those are things that we can actually do things about. So I think there's a lot has been shared from our public and from people who've come and given us presentations, including yourself and Mr. Powell's. And this is all good information. So we're trying to find some solutions, both to help the conservation officers learn what those regulations are, as well as what can we do for our farmers here, which is why we brought the 2 advisory committees together as well. Mr. Brown?
I believe, like somebody in this room must know, but there weren't any deer here 50 years ago, and I'm sure there was no cougars and bears. I'm not sure. But I think that population has come down to the south end of the island. It's populated around here without the population of people. So somehow we're getting more wildlife down here in the south end.
Mr. Kubicek.
Sergeant Norris, can you give us a little bit more info about the co-funding model of where a municipality can co-fund for an enforcement officer? And after that, maybe how to get the ball rolling on that, how to apply, how to get that initiated? Because I think response time is the greatest challenge, and it looks like if we can, as a district, be proactive on that and get a little bit of help,
Yeah, we've got all the documentation at our headquarters that I could, get that information to you folks. It's essentially a joint funding model broken down by cost and an agreement. I think quite a few of them that we've done are usually sort of in 5-year agreements that can then be renewed as time goes on. But initially, I think they start as a 5-year agreement funding model. And again, it can be, generally I think they're 50-50, but not necessarily always. Some municipalities, I believe, are different. And we had this ongoing with certain First Nations as well as municipalities. So it's quite easily adaptable to the location. So certainly after this, I can get that information to you guys.
Have you had any co-funding on the island?
No, we don't have any right now.
On the island, on the mainland mainly?
Mainland and interior and the north in particular, yeah.
Councillor Shukin.
Thanks. The word cull was mentioned just a little while ago, and this is a question mainly about the role of local government in all of this, but also everyone else. So I don't know where this was coming from, but there was a rumor going out about someone advocating for a cull. I don't even know who the parties were that were advocating for a cull, but a local government, this is a question to use, Scott, local governments cannot undertake a cull of cougars. Is that?
It would have to be in conjunction with the wildlife branch, and a permit would have to be issued, but I don't think it's not a normal course of business.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happened in Oak Bay and Victoria with the deer, there was never a cull that was through the municipality. It was jointly through arrangement with the municipality and the wildlife branch to try to reduce the number of deer in Victoria. I think Kimberley did the same thing. The Cranbrook-Kimberley area did the same thing. But it wouldn't be something on your own Metchosin would just embark upon.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks for the clarity. One other quick question on this. Someone has, sort of along the same lines, someone has advocated that Metchosin buy a trap and that we use it as sort of a fast response. My own sense is that would be really problematic because once the animal it's fine, we can move it around, we can own it, but once there's an animal in the trap, that's a whole different thing, and I think it falls to...
Well, it falls to us, but, so cougars are not animals, like there's a trapping regulation that is to do with fur bearers. Cougars are on that list of animals that people go out and trap. Right, so that would be a completely one-off if you were able to somehow get a permit through the wildlife branch to even get the authorization to do it. So there's nothing right now, there's no model for that where a municipality just goes out and buys a trap and wants to use a trap and start trapping cougars. And then again, if anybody had trapped a cougar again, needed to euthanize a cougar, that would have to be us or other law enforcement to take that step.
Okay, thanks for the clarity.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious as to, you mentioned about the home range of cougars, and this is just my lack of knowledge of cougars, but it strikes me that if they've got relatively large home ranges because they're large carnivores, there has to be some limit on the density. Typically large carnivores they're not like prey species that you get them in large numbers.
Correct.
Yes. So I'm just curious if and I know you spoke of the science that's undertaken through the wildlife branch. Is the density being tracked and are home ranges getting smaller? That's the only way I can think that a density would increase of a large predator. But again, that's just, I'm not a terrestrial carnivore expert.
No, when you look at, let's just take bears around a salmon stream, for example. Bears normally are going to have a home range. They're not going to tolerate other bears in their territory. But all of a sudden it's fall and there's a gazillion salmons in that stream. all of a sudden they're going to tolerate another bear right there, another one there, and there, and there. So cougars in an area where all of a sudden you've got high prey species around, their ranges might be a little bit smaller because they're able to fend for themselves in a smaller home range. Right? Generally, home ranges are quite large to be able to fend for yourself and not deplete your prey species. So again, if you have an artificially high prey population, whether it's livestock or other, you're going to have an artificially high predator population. So generally there might be one male and up to like 5 females in one overlapping. So one male his range will overlap 5 females' ranges. So if you think about an area like Metchosin, that theoretically you could have a number of different females who are having offspring and one male servicing that whole area. But then again, you have all of a sudden one mama cat who decides she's got to fend for these 3 kittens. Usually it's somewhere from 1 to 3 is what they have in litter. But particularly the ones that we see that have 3, they're much more food stressed. And so you've got that available food in the landscape with lambs around, they're going for that. Right, they're going for the easiest prey they can to get that nutrition for their young. So again, that's the balance that we look at when we think of what's happening in the landscape is, where are the cougar calls coming from? Are they all one little area, or are we getting one call the next day it's 5 miles away and we're going, that's a different cougar. Oh, and then another one over here. Oh, there's another one here now with 3 family groups potentially in a very small area and a lot of lambs.
So they, like bears, could then, they could
They'll
shrink
tolerate
and
each other.
expand
Yes.
throughout the year,
Yes.
based on the season. I
Yeah.
see.
So, and again, they'll fight each other. I mean, males will kill a female's kittens to get back into estrus for more mating time, right? So you'll see that from time to time. Bears and cougars will do that.
Councillor Gray.
So through the chair, Scott, I just want to ask you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm just curious, we've got numbers that have been presented that in 2023 there were 61 sheep killed, in 2024 30 sheep killed. What about like 2020, 2021, 2022?
Unfortunately, so they changed our database a couple of years ago, and so it's really difficult to go in the old database and get numbers.
Yeah.
I don't have access to it anymore. There's a few people that do have access, but it's not easily dug out from my understanding, so I don't have any of those numbers. I mean, anecdotally, thinking back pre-COVID, we were often in Metchosin going after both cougars and bears, and again, it was all of a sudden it was cougars, and all of a sudden it was bears. And so that was the interesting change for a while. Now, as we've all talked about tonight, it's back to seemingly just cougars on the landscape going after sheep.
Could through the chair, could I ask John? John, do you have a sense of the numbers before?
Well, yes, those numbers are probably correct for the last 2 years, and they're not all mine, they're community kills. And for several years before that, we didn't have any cougar kills in Metchosin, but there was a number of bear kills.
Yeah. Maybe
The year before it was 15, and a high of 50 when there was one particular bad bear got 40 or something.
That's right, yeah.
So something in the range of 30, since 2010, mix of bears and cougars, but it's, nothing before 1995.
Thank you. Well, my other question, if I might, was, so Scott, say you arrive on the scene then, and there's been a kill, and I'm taking from the comments that from time to time, then you have a discussion with, or every time you discuss with the farmer what's going on and what might be done. And so when is it that you say, look, this is a problem? You've mentioned the idea of a family that you can see, and they killed a number of sheep, and you mentioned they drink the blood and eat one lamb, and then that's it. What's the definition of a problem cougar from your perspective? When do you say, okay, this is one we're going to dispatch?
Well, particularly the ones that are sort of daytime coming in and they're killing stuff, daytime kills. That one's hard to gauge in some respects, as you guys are aware, because as the daylight is changing in March, sometimes it's now all of a sudden 6:30 in the morning. It's light technically, but again, cougars are most active between dusk and dawn, and they will be active in those early hours. It's when we start getting those ones in the middle of the day where there's people around, there's activity going around, and those cougars are now out and about, being seen, not afraid of people, and targeting livestock out in those open fields. Those ones become, because we have to look at our matrix and we think about the public safety risk of it. A cougar killing a sheep in a field isn't a big public safety risk, but a cougar killing a sheep in a field next to a house in the middle of the daytime, all of a sudden that's changing the aspect that we look at. Because all of a sudden now that cougar's not afraid to have the noise of cars and people and other activity going around it. So we gauge that as sort of our response. Again, each one's different. You look at the landscape, whereabouts is it? Is there lots of cover, lots of forested area nearby for the cougar to escape to? Or is it in one field that just happens to be right beside Langford and there's a school over here and a subdivision next door? Right now, all of a sudden, we're a lot more concerned in terms of what that public safety risk is. So, but yeah, when we start to see that pattern where you've got a particular, a mom who's teaching young to come in and kill a number of lambs and or sheep or whatever it is, we start looking at that and say, okay, well, this is now potentially going to be an even bigger problem if we don't remove that cougar from the landscape. It's not a choice we like to make. We don't like to kill things. We all got this job as conservation officers to protect wildlife. We also know that we have part of our job duties is to protect the public and protect people's livelihoods to some extent. That's not our prime duty, and it's not something that we are there to do all day, every day. Our job description is not to be sheep protectors. It isn't. That's never written anywhere in our job description. However, it comes part of the job being conservation officer. And so we have all of our other duties, and again, when you look at the policy, what it talks about is what are the husbandry, and if the husbandry is good, and you've got a cougar that again is trying to break into barns or structures, it's defeating electric fencing, very goal oriented. We look at this as, okay, this potentially is now a bigger public safety risk and a bigger risk in overall as a population, human population, as well as what other livestock are in that area. So we try to look at a lot of factors, and there is no one answer that triggers it in each scenario. But a big factor again is what steps were taken to prevent the issue in the first place, right?
Councilor
And
Craig.
then so it sounds like when that bear was killing all these different sheep and behaving oddly, that would be a relatively clear decision from the
running around
process.
killing sheep in the middle of the day, and and, you're seeing it. There's one time, John, I think we were all chasing it with the dogs at one time, that one bear. But yes, because again, now it becomes a public safety risk. You have this bear that's middle of the day running around, running across roads, running by houses. And again, it is just more of a risk to the population in that neighborhood, in that area.
So I'm getting the sense then that each kill that you get a call to, it's an individual assessment. It's not like we could say, well, do the following. It's that you're following your guidelines and looking at those things.
Correct.
And having a discussion with the farmer. And so it kind of, if I may, turns back to the guidelines, turns back to your
our matrix and our guidelines. Yeah, so our matrix, our guidelines, and the best management practices. So we look at all those.
Yeah.
Then we also look at what are our other duties that are taking place at that time. Right, we're a law enforcement agency, and public safety is high on our risk ranking in what we do. And so again, a sheep killed in the middle of the night isn't going to risk rank as high as a bear in a schoolyard or some of the other duties that we have to cover. Right, in a perfect world, yeah, we have more availability to do that, but we don't. So the resources we have to look at what is happening that day and what other jobs and job duties do we have. And again, sometimes by the time the call comes in, we're already out of cell range dealing with something else, either on patrol or on the way to Port Renfrew or Nitnet or whatever.
And then maybe the last one, just in this string here, the matrix then, just hearing from what John Buchanan was mentioning, it was looked at and developed, and then is it re-looked at every so many years? You look back and say, okay, how are we doing?
So what he's referring to, sorry to cut you off, what he's referring to, I believe, is the best management practices you were part of. So that was in conjunction with the Ministry of Agriculture. Our matrix is through the Conservation Officer Service. So it has been updated from the last update, I think was 2019, if I remember, it says on here. I believe it might have been 2018 or 2019. Hold on a second here. But it does get, revamped from time to time. So the preventing and responding to conflicts with large carnivores was updated. I'm sure I saw it in there somewhere. Just a second. That was April 2016. That was the last time that was updated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Shukin.
Scott, I apologize if you've already provided this, but where are we at with Cougars being destroyed this year as compared to last year? I'm sorry if you mentioned it.
Yeah, this year, actually, looking at I don't think we did talk about this. I don't think in Metchosin we have euthanized any cougars. Just a second, where's my paper? This one. Yeah, I don't believe we've. No, we had tried to trap at one point in the spring. I'm trying to remember who's Mitchell's farm, I believe it was. If anyone remembers, that was daytime killings. We'd set traps, and I believe that was at least 2 cougars. There was a mom, at least one other seen. Do you remember, John, by any chance?
That was place. You put a trap.
Oh, was that yours?
Cougar.
Yeah, Rick might have. Yeah, Rick was out there.
Yeah, Rick.
Well, we've caught quite a few. The live traps have been quite successful over the years. We've caught quite a few of the live traps. It depends on the cat. Some, and again, same with bears. Some just won't go into traps. But this year has been much reduced, and I don't believe in the last couple of months I haven't seen that we've had any calls reported. Is there anything that's come through that you guys haven't reported?
No, not locally.
No.
I believe that the cougar was here in the spring, moved through the highlands. He killed a number of ours there.
That was maybe May, sometime in mid-May.
Something like that, yeah.
That was the last
moved
one.
the sheep out, and then we hear that cougars in Uvic, well, I'm not saying that cougar, but I suspect it's the same one. And then it's back in the highlands. It moves around quite a lot.
Well, there's one that we had a sighting on some security camera in Cabral Bay last week, up in a tree. So it looked like a young cougar though, so I'm not sure it would be the same one. And this again, we've seen this over the last number of years. They'll make their way up the peninsula, they'll cross over, and then they'll come back down towards Uvic and down to Cabral Bay area. And then the odd one, the one we tranquilized Peter and I did in 2015, which was behind the legislature. There's been a number in those scenarios. And again, you look at the deer population in those areas, that's why they're there, and the raccoons. There's tons of deer and raccoons. But I believe there's a number of different cougars in that area. You'll have the highlands, and you'll have other ones in central Saanich. We've had quite a few sightings over the last number of months. No conflict with them, and even the one in Cabral Bay, we get those calls, and then we say to people, do you have a photo or a video? And then we, first we wait, is it really a cougar or is this just a house cat? Because we get a lot of those pictures come through and it's just a house cat. But then the ones that come through, it really actually is a cougar. Okay, what's next? When's the next sighting? Are we going to have to zoom in and try to deal with this? Now it becomes a big public safety risk when you have an urban area like that. So again, risk ranking, those cougars end up being a very, very high priority for us as opposed to a cougar that's predating on livestock, particularly at night or early hours, day or night. Can I just make one mention about the fencing?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say, I can't remember when we talked about this last time, but what I'd heard through Cam Hill, I'm not sure if you talked to Cam, John, or anybody else had, but he's with Cattlemen's Association, is there's a farmer up near Clearwater area who had some predation on his sheep, and so he'd set up some sort of a portable electric fenced area in the middle of his field. So it's not, again, you don't have to have your whole fields and your whole acreage fenced. But apparently what this farmer is doing is he would have, at nighttime, the sheep are all inside this fenced area, electric fenced area, the water's in there, and the salt lick's in there. Daytime, the sheep are let out, the gate's closed. So the sheep don't have access to any water throughout the day or the salt lick. And so it's enticed them back in each night. And that's had a huge reduction in his losses in the last couple of years since he set that up. So again, when I'm saying Cougars should have 20 feet, I'm not envisioning you guys all building 20-foot fences around all your farms, but you could have some select areas, some small areas fenced off. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be 20 feet tall, but again, some sort of shielding within that fencing that the Cougars can't see through, maybe a little bit of a roof around it that they can't, even if it's a little bit. And again, there's different ways. People can be pretty ingenious. You can make different things that are portable and still can be used in different fields and moved around. And I know it is extra work, but again, trying to find that balance between losses and good predator-prey relationships in our neighborhoods, that will help. It'll go a long way. So.
That fellow had the additional, it was very rural, and he had guardrails too, which made it pretty successful.
Even better, okay. Sorry.
Mr. McKinnon, you had a question?
Sure. Yeah. First, a quick comment. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have access to good historic records on sheep kills and cougar and bear kills. And if it's, as you suggest, Sergeant Norris, that there may be somebody who has access to them, but others don't, or they're not generally accessed, I think it's something that our council ought to be requesting, because whether we're doing a better job or a worse job year to year depends on how we've done in the past. Maybe we're doing way better now than we have through most of the last 50 years. Maybe we're doing way worse now, but we essentially don't know. So I would really like to see what we could access in terms of those data so we can decide whether we're doing a better or worse job. I think it would be nice to establish some goals municipally. I think an absolutely unrealistic but good goal might be no livestock kills and no predators dispatched. And we won't ever do that. But some years they'll go up and down, and every time they go up on either side, I would consider it a failure. And it's maybe one way of starting to think about what we want to see as a municipality. And I would agree with you also, Chair Donaldson, that I think every predator kill and every livestock kill is the result of a human caused problem. And we're humans, we should be able to at least realize when we're failing on one side or the other and try and adjust plans accordingly.
And to the data, it is accessible. It's just that when they changed databases 2 years ago, the database was failing. I think it's part of the problem. It's a very old database. Numbers can be dug out of it, but they're just not reliable, unfortunately. From my understanding, the stability of the database. Certainly something we can look at, and if there's numbers that Metchosin would like us to get, we can get our people at headquarters to try to dig up more numbers to find that out. So certainly it's not out of the question to get, it's just not always greatly reliable, unfortunately, just the way the database was built.
I think it would help us decide whether we're doing a really good or a really shitty job. And it's probably one or the other. So.
And just on that, so with the database, it's not just about sightings. You're probably looking for everything. You're looking for sightings, you're looking for kills, times of day, all that sort of stuff, correct?
Yeah, and the old database was built differently than the new database in terms of searchability. So you can sort of just pull up cougar calls, which means every sighting, which could be house cats, which could be anything, right? And we get a lot of those calls. I heard a noise last night and I listened on Google and it's a cougar, right? We get a lot of those calls. So it is very difficult without then going through and opening up and reviewing every single call and what actually happened, what was the outcome. It is a very cumbersome job to go through and try to get that information out of it, to know exactly what has happened. Again, it's not impossible, it's just not an easy task. but it's certainly something I can ask about headquarters and see what steps they could take.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable. I think the other thing I'd like to know too is, and this is something I learned when we had a bear kill, is when the conservation officer did arrive, and we went over the animal looking at the type of tear or the type of bite, or the very first thing he said is look for scat. And apparently this is what they do, is they release and then they kill, and that's a sign, and we found that on 2 different locations. So it was, I learned a lot. I had no idea, but with that as a part of the conservation part of it, and getting the calipers out, checking the distance of those bites depending, to determine which animal it was it a bear or was it a cougar, all that sort of information I suspect is helpful for you as a conservation officer in tracking where all these activities are of wildlife as well, correct?
Yeah, when we look at a kill, we're looking at the mechanism of that injury to the sheep or whatever the animal is to determine, is this a wolf kill, a bear kill, a cougar kill? Was it attacked by dogs? We've had many of those ones where they're just dogs out killing. And so there's different mechanisms of injury and death, and that's what we're looking at. Because again, we don't want to be now going after a bear when it was a cougar that killed that animal and vice versa. And sometimes you'll have a large bear that might push a cougar off a kill that the cougar made, and now we show up, the farmer shows up and says, so there's a bear there, the bear must have killed it. But it was actually the cougar that killed it. The bear just opportunistically showed up and pushed the cougar off its kill. We know that's happened multiple times over the years. That happens all the time in nature.
Councillor, did you have a question?
I did have a couple. I just wondered, is there any funding out there for, say, farmers to do a test field and what you were talking about with the the vision blocking liners and things like that? Is there for any extra funding, at least maybe they could pick a smaller pasture and see how that works? That's my first question.
Not that I know of. Through the agriculture branch, I know there's funding for different programs. I don't know if there is fencing money that I know that you can go through. Graham Fowler, I think, is the guy he's the contractor that works with the Ministry of Agriculture that is doing a lot of that work throughout BC. In particular, I think he's based in Courtenay maybe, but covers Vancouver Island. But if you were to contact the Ministry of Agriculture, and I can get you Graham Fowler's contact information later on after the meeting, certainly he's someone you guys could reach out to and ask those questions about funding.
Right. The other one is, has there ever been any, I don't even know if it's possible, but any sort of mapping of the wildlife corridors, the general ones that we have in Metchosin?
Not through the Conservation Officer Service. I think maybe through Nietzsche Harris's group, the Coexisting with Carnivores group, there might have been some people looking at that, if that rings a bell to anybody, but certainly not through us. No, there isn't through the Conservation Officer Service.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to that one. There has been quite a lot of corridor mapping done by Chris Bone and students at the University of Victoria, and especially between the Souk Hills and Metchosin and adjacent communities. So corridors from the hills down to Metchosin.
Councillor Shukin.
Sorry, back to the question of data again. We were talking about maybe tracking sheep kills. Do you track that data?
In the new database, it's easier to track that data. Yes, it is. Depending on the farmers provide the information, we still have to go through each report, because the report just won't pull up the number. You have to look at each one and say, okay, this was a sheep kill, open it up and go back and look and see what did the farmer tell the conservation officer and what was written in the report. So sometimes when they make the phone call in, it's easy. You look at the title of it and it'll say, lost 6 lambs, 6 sheep. And you go, oh, quick, easy. But then where it gets problematic, those are the updates. I think the last time, John, I think we were up to 11 updates earlier this spring when you phoned a number of times, right? So the same report has 11 updates. So then you got to open each update and read, oh, now there's 2 more, there's 3 more, there's 3 more, 2 more, 1 more. So it becomes a bit of an exercise to try to add all that up, especially when you have multiple calls from multiple farmers. But, we try to track it in some respects, I think. Like this year when we were looking this morning, I think from what we had from you, I think, John, was 15 lambs at one point. Then there was another call that came through, I think there was another one that came through that was not an update, it was a new number.
On
It
the
was
Highlands. Yeah, that
maybe the Highlands one, that was 3 initially, then 3, I think then you called in a couple more updates as well. So again, it gets difficult to keep track of all of them, but we try to have some sense of what's happening in the landscape with that. And again, if we had the time to go through each one, we could add it up.
Yeah.
Again, we just don't have the time to be adding all that up.
Okay.
It does become challenging.
And there's probably an easier way of approaching it, isn't it? Just someone called John who was collecting the data.
Well, yes, yes.
So, just as a follow-up, just even before some of the earlier comments, it struck me that there's a deeper research project here. So going back and looking at the data, but also what's going to be happening on a forward basis. And it was interesting to hear what John was saying about, like, apparently no cougar, no serious predation prior to 1995. But it just seems like we're in a different landscape right now. So it would be interesting, and maybe there's some wonderful grad student out there who's waiting for a project, or there's the possibility of a subcommittee amongst the people here who can manage that process. I struggle to think that it's going to be something the district can take on, but we've got established committees, and maybe there's something there that could be done. Notwithstanding that maybe there's a lot of other work that can be done and people will try things, but maybe an approach to data collection might be a good thing to start. And I just want to reflect, Nithya Harris did write a letter to us. She suggested a working group. I'm not that supportive of just a working group with not a clear mandate, but maybe there's room for that kind of thing. If there's a research project and a data tracking project that could go on. So, and there are better minds at this table than mine in terms of how that can be managed. But I'm reluctant to drop anything more on staff. And so, yeah.
Councillor Gray?
Yeah, through the chair, Scott, one of the suggestions that's come up then from the Agriculture Committee is that we advocate for faster responses. You've already heard from the mayor the question of your staffing levels. Is there something that can be done if we wrote a letter in and said, hey, give us faster responses? Is there a way to deal with that? Is it mostly a staffing issue, or would it be just related to other duties and the other workload?
A big factor is the other duties and the other workload. Because again, we look at what other calls are coming in and we risk rank them. And again, public safety is highest on the risk ranking structure. And we are, a law enforcement agency as well. So we've got wildlife related issues that are public safety risks. Then we've also got human health and safety issues from some of the environmental calls that we get. And then there's just other wildlife related poaching incidents that are happening that we're trying to investigate. Looking at our mandate is very broad. From month to month throughout the year, there's different activities happening in the landscape which dominate our time. The winter months, steelhead fishing is big. There's a lot of people fishing for steelhead. The summer months, you've got rivers closed to fishing, so now you have to be out there policing people from fishing. Shouldn't be fishing in those rivers because of the drought. In the spring and fall, most municipalities have open burning windows so people can burn their backyard trees and shrub waste. Now, that overlaps into the open burning smoke control regulations, so then we all of a sudden are getting a lot of calls coinciding with lambing season often. So you're still steelhead season, now you've still got some bears around, now you've got some cougars killing livestock. The issue of people dumping garbage doesn't end, is frustrating for all of us. And then the calls of an injured deer lying on the side of the road that needs to be put down. That's just a little bit of an example of what we do on a daily basis. And again, it ebbs and flows throughout the year, but when fall hunting season starts, then all of a sudden our workload goes through the roof, because now there's a lot of hunting complaints come in, and that also coincides with bears trying to fatten up for the winter. And now you have bears in neighborhoods getting into garbage, fruit trees, et cetera, et cetera. So we get busy at different times of the year doing all sorts of other jobs. And so faster response time, if we had more officers, theoretically is possible, but I can't guarantee it would, based on all the other duties that we have and the ground we have to cover.
Mr. Penn?
So as the advisory committee to the council, we've been looking at agriculture in this region, and our role is to try and encourage and stimulate agriculture. And by and large, it's a job that's done by people who have other jobs. It's not a very lucrative profession. And so when they hear that they're, A, they're not very high on the list, and B, that you're not here to protect their livelihood, we need some response to them to say, well, how are we going to help you do what our mandate is, which is to get more agriculture happening locally so that we can protect our food source and such. So what's plan B? Because I see that a response time is not going to be possible if you're way down the list.
This is, I think, to answer that really is the mitigation, and that's why we are such advocates for mitigation, and that's the prime way you reduce the conflict.
Well, they've tried that, it doesn't work. So that's why they're looking for more.
Right, and again, there's certain steps. Again, throw enough money at something, problems get solved, right?
And they don't have the money. So.
Right, and that's the reality, and this is again the balance that we try to find, and we understand and we respect that. Again, we're not creating predator-free zones. There will be predators on the landscape, bears and cougars, and they will from time to time predate on sheep and other livestock. Again, we have stepped in numerous times. Again, last year when it got really bad, we killed 6 cougars. That's not the choice we want to make, but in the interest of public safety and the farmers' interest in the community, those steps were taken. And we will continue to take those steps when we need to and when we have the capacity to. But it can't be expected in this climate and what our mandate is. Our mandate is a public safety provider and a law enforcement agency. Our mandate is not sheep protection. That, like I mentioned earlier, it just isn't. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that is the reality of what we do. And again, it is part of our role when we have the capability, when we have the ability to get there. And again, there's also, when you look at, if you think about it, John, a lot of times we're not going to get the dogs out chasing a cougar on a hot sunny day. The scent disappears in minutes. So unless the cougar's on scene feeding on something, we're likely not showing up. So again, cats sometimes will kill and move on and disappear again. Bears are the same thing. And it becomes very intensive time-wise for us as well to continue to respond to continual kills and continual kills. And that's where, again, we want the mitigation to be taken. And sometimes, again, as John, you've done, it's and other farmers have done, it's moving the sheep to different fields, different areas. If you've got a problem bear in one area in particular, if you get the sheep out of there and get them somewhere else, that might solve your problem. It might be short-term, but it might be long-term. And same thing with cougars. Again, they're opportunistic. They're going to go for what the prey in the landscape is. And there's ample sheep and lambs out there at nighttime, early morning, dusk. Without protection, there's a good chance they're going to be predated upon. And so, again, we can't be expected this comes right from the top, we are not sheep protectors. That's not our job. That's not our role. But we play a part in assisting. But the big one is the education and trying to spur on farmers and producers to have mitigation. Whether that's, again, fencing barns, guardian animals, etc. And again, we don't want to see agriculture suffer. I mean, agriculture is important for all of us. But again, we are conservation officers, and we have to find that balance between a healthy predator-prey relationship on the landscape.
Robin, go ahead.
Can I through me to Lorraine?
Yeah, sure.
Scott, quite often we phone in the morning if we have the deadline or something, and we don't get a call back until the next day. If we could get a trap there that night, we would catch the cougar. But no, it's the next day. So they come back that night. We know they come back because we see it. and there's no trap. So, you know, this delay is critical. And it's not once it happens, it's frequently, and I'm beginning to wonder, you know, I know you're busy, but also it's not very popular to kill cougars. So I'm wondering if you maybe just, you know, sometimes wait and call us the next day because you might not have to that way.
No, please don't think that. We don't delay calling people because we don't want to call people back. We really call people back when we are able to.
Like a whole, you know, sometimes it's 2 days. Like I know one time we phoned on Friday and I think we didn't hear back from anybody until Sunday. That's not good enough.
And that, again, we were down to 3 staff instead of 5, and when you're trying to cover 7 days a week, we can't cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day always. We do our best to do that. We're back to 4 staff, so it's a little better. As of May, we got the 4th, so Peter's position got replaced in May, so that's, you know, a bit of a delay for us getting that back. And that should help in some of those call response times. But again, because of our other duties, we can't guarantee that we're going to get there right away and get that call back right away. We endeavor to, believe me, we really do endeavor to, but we're not always going to be able to. That's the reality of our mandate is very broad. And our mandate is not just to respond to sheep being killed. And I'm sorry that's the way it is, but that unfortunately is what our mandate is. It's very broad.
Anyone else at the table have a question?
Hi, Sergeant Norris. I was curious if resources weren't an issue at all, and let's say that Cougar was killing lambs on a pasture that didn't have any special public safety variables attached to it, what is the threshold for Cougar kills until conservation would be willing to get involved and answer a call and deliver a trap at the moment of the call if resources were not an issue here?
Well, again, we don't want to create predator-free zones, so we urge, the first question we ask is what steps have been taken to not come into conflict with that cougar. So, you know, looking at our policy again, it's if the farmers or the producers aren't taking any steps, then we don't necessarily have to act and show up and target that cougar. Now, we look at the totality of the circumstances again, looking at, so the resource thing, let's just say the resource thing's at the window and there's 50 conservation officers for the South Island. Would we be out here going after all the sheep or all the cougars? No, we wouldn't, because again, we want a predator-prey balance out there. We want farmers to take as many mitigative steps as they can, so there are still cougars on the landscape to make sure that the predator-prey balance continues with deer, cougars, and raccoons. So the threshold, again, it's an individual basis for the call that we kept. We look at all the circumstances of that kill. Was it 2 days ago? Is the cougar likely to come back that day, that night? Was it just there 20 minutes ago? What are the public safety risks to people in that neighborhood about that cougar? You know, was that sheep killed at 2 a.m.? Was it killed at 2 p.m. and there's a school next door? So there's a lot of factors in there, but we're not, if we had all the resources in the world, we wouldn't be creating predator-free zones and killing every cougar that kills a sheep.
Not predator-free, but I mean, I think the farmers in Metchosin have long been willing to give up a limited number of livestock animals, and I wonder if the kills were happening only during regular times, dawn and dusk, just natural cougar behavior killing our lambs in Metchosin. It sounds rather, it's hard, as someone who's looking to get into farming and has been lamb farming for 2 years now, and would like to see a future in that. What I'm hearing really destroys confidence in doing so without knowing that, from what it sounds like, is conservation is not, the priority of keeping farming economical is not a priority of conservation, which is, I'm not, you know, that may just be matter of fact and fair.
I wouldn't look at it in terms of, trying to, because again, we're not sheep protectors, that's not our job, is to protect people's sheep. We're a public safety provider. So we look at the overall risk to public safety involved in what's happening, and when you get, you know, cougars that, in particular, Mom is teaching all the kittens to kill multiple sheep and multiple lambs in a farmer's field, and looking at the neighboring spillover, what that might impact is all of a sudden, like I said, you've got higher predator numbers than you should. Right? The carrying capacity is only so great in a natural population. You put humans in the mix, and you throw livestock in the mix, predator numbers go up. So again, trying to have that balance, we still want cougars on the landscape. We are going to take some of those cougars out, like I mentioned. We took out 6 last year in a 2-month period. It's going to ebb and flow every year. It's going to be different every year. So, to make farming economical, that's not my job, is to make farming economical. My job is to be a conservation officer and to protect public safety, right? And conduct my law enforcement business. So there's a balance in there again, and that's what our policy, and please look at our policy and guidelines. It might give you more comfort than you realize in there, because it's not, again, as you all know in this room, we're not saying we're not coming out. We just don't have the resources, and based on the individual circumstances in each kill, we may not be coming, and we may not be able to come. But again, there's steps you as a farmer and producer can take to safeguard your livestock. And there are many producers that are taking steps and that rarely, if ever, have an issue with predators in their flocks, right? And again, I know it's not easy, and I really do sympathize with all you folks and the losses. I know the margins are thin, as you've all mentioned. But again, looking at the resources we have and our mandate, it's just we're not there to protect those animals. It really is as simple as that. It's not our prime mandate.
Thank you.
Just a question. So South Island is your responsibility. Is there activity taking place similar to this that's happening in Metchosin, say, in Duncan?
Periodically, yeah, periodically. It's a lot rarer. Okay. Same with Coombs, Arrington areas. Periodically, again, cougars predating on livestock, sheep. We see a lot of the backyard chicken issue, the bears, and then that spills over to the odd cougar killing chickens. It's quite rare, but sheep primarily.
And the next question. So I'm not a hunter, and I know some folks, kill animals for sport. So are there cougar tags? And now is the reason for giving tags out is to manage the population, or is it strictly for sport? Because from what I've read and from Pete Powell's is that we have a very healthy cougar population on the island, probably the best in the world, I think, what I heard. So what sort of numbers would you know how many cougars are killed by hunters a year? Does that kind of keep a balance, or?
I think that keeps a certain balance, and again, that would be up to the wildlife managers. I mean, that's the discussion you guys could have if you want more data from the wildlife biologist in the regional office. Does hunting have a bit of balance? It has an impact for sure. I don't know what those numbers are. I don't know how much, but you do have areas like Metchosin where there isn't very much hunting. There's a bylaw in place. I think is it archery only in part of Metchosin? I believe the bylaw is. So you've got areas where there is no hunting, and then you've got potentially higher predator numbers. But again, when you look at the prey numbers of natural prey in these areas all around Greater Victoria, they are very, very high.
So is that cougar population growing, do you know? Or because I think they're fairly high in the food chain of dominance in the wild kingdom, per se, right?
Yeah, I don't believe it's growing. And again, that's where we're asking the wildlife biologists what stats they have in terms of the hunter harvest. I just know from 14 years of being a CO in the South Island, again, it's gone up and down in terms of some years we're not killing any cougars, or maybe one cougar, and then some years it's 6 in a 2-month period. It really depends. What we do know is there's a healthy cougar population around, because there's a healthy deer population and raccoon population. And again, when you have lots of unprotected sheep and lambs on the landscape, that increases that population. And again, because mom might have 3 kittens and only one might survive in a normal circumstance with natural prey items, but now you get 3 surviving because there's been a bunch of lambs available to feed those. And now all of a sudden, what we've seen this a number of times where all of a sudden mom splits off from the 2 juveniles, and now you have 2 juveniles, they're now going on their own cougar adventures, if you will, and they again, they're learning to hunt. So what do they hunt? The easy prey and the unprotected sheep in a field. So again, and that's where again, the mitigated strategies are the reason we push those mitigated strategies. We don't want to see you folks losing land and sheep. We don't want that to happen. Again, that's why we're so strong on pushing the message of taking whatever mitigated strategies you can.
Yeah, so I see our role at the district and as a council in terms of education, and certainly asking for more information from the wildlife biologists, and then education in terms of being the facilitating or a conduit for information. Of course, advocacy and support for our farmers and the agricultural community, the promotion and the preservation of wildlife corridors. And one of the most easy things that we can do now is approve our agricultural plan, because already there have been grants that we could have applied for, or the farmers could have applied for, but they need an agricultural plan to attach to that application. So we've got an agricultural plan. We paid over $40,000 for it. We need to approve it so that it can be used for what it's a tool for us to use. So I do see our role as going back to the advocacy piece. Minister Heyman, the conservation services within his mandate, and so we can advocate for more officers, and also send a letter to the Minister of Agriculture, because their Minister Pam Alexis's mandate is to promote and conserve and protect farming, increase farming in the province. So I think we should send letters to both of them with the information that we have. Anyways, and also approve our agricultural plan so that we can apply for funding.
Thank you. Did you want to make that a motion to write these letters to?
Oh, sure. So with that, I would move that council writes a letter, the mayor write a letter on behalf of the council to Minister Heyman and Minister Pam Alexis regarding a need for an increase in conservation officers and help with advocating for our farmers who are trying to secure food security in our region. Okay. That's a motion.
Thank you. Have a second?
I'm going to withhold myself seconding. I feel like there's more, I personally feel like there's more that we have to talk about in terms of what we, I just feel like there's another side of the equation that we have to address as well. And I feel like a letter isn't going to be maybe as effective until we talk about that. And I'm struggling to actually understand how to articulate what I'm saying, but I feel like we're too early in all of this. I fully support approving the ag plan, but I think there's more work that we have to do to suss out the problem. So.
Okay, and we do have an opportunity to probably meet some of these ministers in September in Vancouver too. So a letter at least would put them on notice that we've got a situation that we want to be taken seriously. And I agree, we need to flesh out what is it that we want to do, or what is it that the farmers, how can we advocate for them, and educate the rest of our residents as well of the coexistence. Because as Mr. Norris is saying, there's a public protection component. You know, we've heard people being, in my own neighborhood, being followed by a cougar, or little children on trampolines and the goat gets killed not too far on the same property. So there's those different things. We know those are happening, and yes, they do, and they ebb and flow. People need to be aware as well. So those are things we can do education-wise, and I'm sure there's information that Mr. Norris probably has pamphlets or something that we can access for that sort of thing too.
Again, my only hesitation is what we're talking about is a broader spectrum of actions. And I think what Little was, what the key thing I picked up is advocating for more conservation, more service from the conservation officers. Again, not opposed to that, but I think there's a whole other set of actions that we should be looking at in addition to that. So I might suggest we just postpone this for now until we frame up the question, the situation a little bit more, or what we're going to do as a municipal government. Again, especially with the input of our ag committee, both committees.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I'll withdraw the motion then.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So with that then, because we've talked now for over an hour, where do we want to take this next? Do we want to put this back to the committees, to the advisory committees to come up with a plan? Is that what this finance committee is?
Councillor Donaldson, I thought there had been discussion of a subcommittee, potentially between the two. And I wonder if a smaller group of people might come up with, again, a suite of actions that we can look at. We talked about a research project, potentially more education. Sergeant Norris has talked about some of the innovative projects that others have done. I have a feeling that one day technology will be our friend, and we'll have drones that can go in patrols through the field. Like, anyway, something.
That technology.
Yeah, yes. Armed with AI. But I wonder if the formation of a subcommittee might be something, a smaller group, not even a working group, but.
So while we do have Mr. Norris here, does anybody else have any more questions so we're not going to tie him up too much longer?
Just a quick comment. There's a provincial election in the fall, and I think these guys need some help. And if it's important, talk to your people who are running.
Mr. Penn.
Just one other thing. I think that the suggestion that there are sort of rogue animals that, bad apples that are responsible for a lot of it. Is there any? Does wildlife do any tracking with GPS tags or anything?
Not at this point. The only ones they're generally tracking are now the bears being released from Northbound Wildlife Recovery Center. So the ones, I think last year in the South Island we took 8 cubs from the South Island that either mums were hit by cars or we euthanized. They were raised there and they were released a couple weeks ago. They've all got collars on them, and so it's kind of interesting seeing their data last week as they're all dispersing and where they're all going. So you might see a bear with a collar on its neck in your neighborhood at some point. But generally, for cougars right now, there's no projects that I'm aware of that they're tracking.
That's all.
I just have one last question. Just thinking about if they are rogue animals that are making up the population of the animals that are dispatched, is there any type of post-mortem analysis that is done by people who would be able to determine that there would be something that is unique about those animals? I mean, Abbotsford Animal Health Center comes to mind. I'm just wondering what happens to the animals after they have been killed.
That's a great question. So some of them that are exhibiting behaviors that we think they are sick or injured or old, they will go to, so Kylie Thacker, Dr. Thacker, she's a provincial veterinarian that works in the animal office, and so she will test for things like distemper. And we've had a number of cougars from the South Island that have tested positive for distemper. And so sometimes it's those sick ones that end up, again, they're targeting the easy prey, and that's an unprotected sheep in a field. Older cougars, same thing. Their teeth are starting to fall out, rot, and they go for the easy prey. And again, going back with the young cougars, sometimes it really is just a case of learning to hunt. But yeah, so we'll look at each of those cougars when we're euthanizing them. We're not taking every single one for testing, but certainly the ones that exhibit some sort of injuries or sickness that we're observing in behavior that we will send for testing. And Dr. Thacker does it.
Thank you very much for answering all our questions and building and imparting your wisdom. appreciate that very much, and for taking the trip to get here.
Yeah, sorry about the Malahide accident.
No, it's okay.
I was planning to be here 15 minutes early and I was 15 minutes late, so I apologize for that.
All right.
Thank you for having me. Again, you know, I sympathize with the farmers. I really do. John and Lorraine, I really do. I understand you're doing what you can. Again, please understand, it's not that we don't want to help you. It's not our prime mandate. And again, the mitigated steps is what, you know, there's a government message that we're trying to push. And that's the hope, and that's to decrease the number of conflict animals on the landscape. We want them to target deer, raccoons, and feral rabbits, for that matter as well. So again, anytime I can be here to answer questions and help out, I'm always willing to. I'm always willing to talk with you folks. And we're here to respond when we can, and we will respond. And again, please know, we're not saying no. It's not like we've said no, we're not going to respond. We will when we can and when it makes sense, and when it, again, looking at all the other totality of circumstances, when we need to. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilor Shukin.
Councilor Donaldson, I would move the formation of a subcommittee composed of the Agriculture Committee and the Metchosin Environmental Advisory Committee to examine the broader question we've been talking about today.
Do I have a seconder?
Sure, I'll second that.
So, moved by Councilor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Lowe. Discussion.
Yeah, and what I would describe as a subcommittee, if you can do this, it's more informal. The meetings aren't necessarily public, but you can invite interested parties, and we can tackle some of the questions that Mayor Little raised in the proposal for a letter to to one of the ministers. And again, this is maybe spelling out more about the need for conservation officers, but also some of the, again, the research project and advocating for some of the actions that might be taken on the ground as well. So again, recognizing that many of those things have been tried and that there's limitations on resources, and the idea of fencing certain fields is likely unachievable. So. And again, part of the whole thing would be driven by the committee itself, but I think there would need to be some mandate from council in terms of giving us something actionable in the semi-near term. So that's an outline. Yeah.
Any other comments, Councillor?
Yeah, well, these committees are capable of making their own subcommittees up without council direction, so it seems to me that we can just leave it in the hands of the committees to, you know, to cooperate on this with that kind of information that you're looking for.
And we had talked about that earlier this spring, and had come to, I think, getting this information all together was what preempted some of that. So that was already something we had discussed in doing, and there was interest in that. Councillor Ray, did you have a comment?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's what we proposed well before all of this happened. Council's now had three presentations, which me, Ask, and Ed Committee have not had on the Cougar question. I think we've got most of our questions answered now. Sort of just if there's a letter to be written, I'm not sure what it would be about. But I think we've got the information now to make those decisions if we want to. The mayor proposed a letter a moment ago. I think for me it was just a question of what would the letter say. We just learned that asking for faster response times maybe is kind of nice to do, but not necessarily going to result in very much. It's kind of a management issue. It may be that we want to engage in a discussion with the ministries or the ministers about the question, but I don't know that we should add to the workload of staff to put a couple more, 3 more letters, you know, to get them to write at the moment when we don't know there'll be much effect of it. So I'm just thinking about workload and that kind of thing. We were ready to do some work before, but now we're more brief than the community are in terms of the details and the issues. So just adding more things for people to do, I'm not sure it makes sense. On the other hand, I'm hearing the call from the farmers about the difficult situation that they're sitting in, and I'm sensitive to that, to wanting to support the farmers who are growing sheep at the moment. And I'll say, given the presentation from Matt just 2 weeks ago, the Buchanan specifically, they've got them, 1,000 sheep out there. That's really a big place to focus on. What might we do for that? But the district itself doesn't have a big role in any of this. It's really a question of where's the province at? And one of the calls from the committee was that we write the ministry. So the first question was about prioritizing support. And we heard a moment ago we could ask for that, but the priorities are such that we don't get much success. Mayor Little had talked about staffing, so maybe a staffing question. Sasha put forward, maybe the district could pay for another conservation officer. We heard, well, the person will probably get used up doing other kinds of work. So I'm left with the other question, which was notifying the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture about what the numbers are today in case they're not known otherwise. That begs the question of, well, what's the data from previously? Is this now? I think we have the farmers' experience, which we know, so that's we can get those numbers. But what else is going on? We don't have so much of. Anyway, I'm a little bit in the situation of I said maybe we get a staff report before this meeting, so we'd actually have some recommendations to look at here and look at them. I just wonder if we might reconvene after this meeting. We've got a lot of new information here. And maybe one or another of us can propose what we have in the letters or what the topic would be.
Thank you. Councillor Shukin.
So I'm not really clear what Councillor Gray is advocating here. He just mentioned a challenge with staffing and putting more on, and a suggestion of a staff report on a matter like this is actually, we've had the information, but it's still fairly going to be complicated to package it in a good way. So I'm not really clear where that's going. Again, I think that there's a good body of knowledge that we all have now, and a smaller group of people coming to focus, and to me that's a good approach for that. It's achievable right now, and I think if it's a subcommittee, there's very little burden on staff, I would say. So.
Yeah, just to be clear, if there was a letter to be written, I'd write the letter. It wouldn't be staff, so I'd write the letter and format it and give it to staff, and they would put it on letterhead. So that is minimal impact on staff. I still think that's a great idea. Maybe they don't know. Maybe Minister Hayman doesn't know it's a concern in Metchosin. Maybe Minister Alexis doesn't know that we're worried about agriculture in Metchosin, and we're concerned about our farmers, our sheep farmers. So I still think that would be something concrete that we could do, and we don't need a subcommittee to tell us what to do for that. But if there is an appetite with me asking PTAS to form a small subcommittee, why not? They were at this meeting. 4 or 5 of them can get together and bring us some information. I'm just reluctant to keep bringing this back to talk about because, at some point we're going to have to do something rather than just talk about it. And so I go back to we need to approve our agricultural plan. We can send some letters. We can keep in mind when we're asked about preservation of or contributing through advocacy, education for wildlife corridors. We should do that. So there are some things to do about it without just keeping coming back and talking about it. With minimal interaction with or burden on the staff.
Those are very good points. I think too, when applying for grants, they'll want to know what have we actually done. So opening up the door to contact with ministries is helpful. Councillor App.
One thing that we really could advocate for as a council is more compensation for farmers who lose animals.
And Councillor Gray, you had your hand up.
Yeah, hearing the mayor just now, if it's to make people aware of the situation here and writing the two ministers, I would support that as an action tonight.
Well, that's what we tried to do, but there was no seconder.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I would support Mayor Little because I just think we need an external actor here. The farmers need more support. We cannot do any more subcommittees. I'm worried about the exhaustion. The Buchanans put in so many hours. Matt has put in so many hours. They're here tonight at the meeting. They've been haying all day in the hot sun. It's just too much of a burden. As a committee, we prepared one paragraph statement. Can I read that to you?
Yes, you can.
And that's what we need. So, in light of the importance of agriculture to Metchosin and the healthy bear and cougar populations, we ask that farmers be supported in the timely relocation or dispatching of specific predators that are threatening their livestock. Farmers appreciate being kept abreast of the latest strategies in predator protection and will commit to continuing to learn and adopt such strategies that can work for their farms. Farmers support increasing habitat for predators and encouraging biodiversity enhancements in Metchosin that will help these populations thrive. This is what we need. We don't need another subcommittee. So I think the Ministry of Agriculture needs to know about this. I was disappointed that the conservation officers can't help us with this specific goal, because this is really what we need. I see a lot of goodwill from the farmers to learn more strategies, to adopt them if they work. These cougars are a formidable threat. Like, it's just, to fence to 20 feet, it's going to take some time. I think everybody's committed to changing. We heard that from John and Lorraine. It takes some time. In the meantime, we need to bridge this gap, and we need external support, and we'd like the district to help us in this end.
I hear what Robin is saying, but simply writing a letter is not going to go that far. So I really like the paragraph you wrote, or collectively you wrote. I still think that there's other actions that we need to take. Again, whether it is an education campaign or beginning a research like a research program, and understanding what it is we want to say to government. Because one of the things that I'll just point out is having the conservation officers come more regularly and more quickly is likely going to mean more cougars are dispatched. Because that is pretty. It's not necessary. From what Scott was saying, it's not the only thing they do. But if there's a problem, that seems to be how they deal with it. And they're not relocating cougars anymore. They're essentially dispatching them. So calling them in more quickly is going to mean more like again, biodiversity impact, if you will, or just the loss of cougars. And I think no one is disputing, I don't think anyone in this room is disputing if there's a problem animal, that there does have to be a terminal solution. That we've seen that. And again, government policy basically is saying that that's the direction they're going in. But bringing a trap out likely means a cougar will be lost. So again, that was kind of what spooked me about simply saying we need more conservation officers attending. So we need that, but we also need to do other things as well. And so that's what and even if the subcommittee helps us to shape what might go in that letter, or a broader set of action that we can take as a district, I think it's worth going in that direction. But that's.
Councillor.
Well, what I would suggest is that Mayor Little write the letters, and then the letters be circulated to MEASC and to the Ag Committee for any suggestions or additions that they might add, and then it just be sent out. They be sent out.
Or it could include this paragraph.
Yeah. So we've got a motion on the table. Yeah. Let's deal with that, and then we'll deal with the livers. Yeah. So the motion on the table is about a subcommittee. And we heard from the Ag Committee and the chair of the Ag Committee that they're exhausted and there's not a lot of appetite for a subcommittee. So I will be prepared to withdraw the motion if you are. No sense having a subcommittee if nobody wants to not.
Yeah, I can withdraw. I guess the letter, I hope it's much more broad than simply we need more conservation officers. I hope it can contain some reference to actions that the district might be willing to take. And, yeah, so I'm happy to withdraw the motion. It doesn't sound like there's a great deal of will, but yeah, in the concept that I like, so fair enough.
So I'll make what I said before into a motion that Mayor Little do compose a letter, and it goes to MEASC and the Ag Committee for kind of approval or additions or any comments, and then it be sent out.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Mayor Little. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? And it's carried. Thank you.
Another question, the agricultural plan is in your portfolio. When is that going to be brought back for approval? Because we really need to spend the money. We've got an agricultural plan. There's been some comments making recommendations on changing it. I'd really like to get that formalized so that we can use it for advocating and providing infrastructure for farmers.
So I've spoken with staff both today and about a week ago, and was given, could be either later this month or next month. So that's the timeline we're working with right now, just with staff holidays and whatnot in the summertime.
And maybe we can have it later on this month,
okay.
Towards the end of the month. That'd be fine with council.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, we can work towards that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Comment?
Yes, please.
In the agriculture plan, there's a whole section on carnivores and predators and all that, and I really feel the district needs to show the farming community that they're serious about agriculture and approve the plan, and then look to the plan and move forward. There's a whole action item on how to approach the predator thing there. It's an amazing document, and I really want to hope the district will show its support for agriculture.
Thank you. Okay.
And perhaps we could also invite Morgan Yates and Allison back for a presentation on work that has been done on preserving and promoting a wildlife corridor between the Souk Hills and Wheaties Beach as well. I think that would be really great to hear about that and hear about what we can do as a council and a district to help make that corridor a reality in the next 5-10 years.
Okay. Any other discussions for this evening? Have we accomplished what we want to?
Yes.
Yes. For now. Okay, so
perhaps Councillor Shukin can reach out to his contacts at UVic to talk and put the bug in their ear, maybe even Royal Roads, for graduate students that were interested in projects. That would be a wonderful graduate student project for 4 years. Okay.
okay. I think we've exhausted this for now. Okay, so last item on the agenda is a request for adjournment of the special finance meeting. Moved by Councillor Shukin and seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Parry, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating. We ask and members of the public as well. Much appreciated.